We continue now at the top of Daf Yud Beis Amud Aleph and Meseches Megillah. This is Megillah Daf 12a. The Gemara says, Tanya Nami Hachi. We have a brisa that supports this as well. Rashi over here says, Tanya Nami Hachi, Devishnos Nebuchadnezzar, Ve'evel Merodach Nivlo Shana. What we're proving over here is that the last year of Nebuchadnezzar and the first year of Evel Merodach is actually the same year, so therefore you have to subtract a year from your calculations. The brisa says, V'od Shana Acheres LeBavel. There was another year for Bavel, V'amad Daryavesh V'hishlima, and Daryavesh got up and he completed the count. And Rashi over here explains, Od Shana Achas LeBavel, Hachi Isa B'Seder Olam. Here's how you find it in Seder Olam. Beibelelia Katel Belshazzar Malka. That night, Belshazzar the king was killed. V'Daryavesh Mado'a Kabel Malchusa. And that's when Daryavesh took over. Harei Shivim Shana Miyom Shemalach Nebuchadnezzar. That finished the 70 years from the time that Nebuchadnezzar became king. And Shivim Chaser Achas Miyom Shekivesh Yehoyakim. It's going to be 69 years from the time that Nebuchadnezzar conquered Yehoyakim. V'od Shana Achas LeBavel Lemalos Shivim Shana. It would be one more year for Bavel to complete the 70 years, Misha Shalat al Yisrael, from the time that they're ruling over Yisrael, meaning again it's 69 years from the conquest of Yehoyakim, one more year to go. V'yamad Daryavesh v'hishlima, that's when Daryavesh gets up, he completes the 70 years. V'achara b'shana acheres molach Koresh bebavel. After this, then Koresh becomes the king. V'nivkedu pekida b'mixas, and a little bit, HaKadosh Baruch Hu starts the redemption. Sha'amar mi bochem mi kol amo yehi elokavimo v'yal, because that's when they say, whoever wants to go up to Eretz Yisrael can go up to Eretz Yisrael. Rashi continues, Lamadnu mi brisa zu. We learn from this brisa, Keshemeis Belshazzar, that when Belshazzar died, Lo hayu lakivesh Yehoyakim elashivim chaser achas. It was only 69 years from the time of the conquest of Yehoyakim. Vanachnu maninu lemala shivim shana. Now before we said it was 70 years. Memhei de Nebuchadnezzar, 45 of Nebuchadnezzar. V'chav gimel de Evel Merodach, and the 23 of Evel Merodach. Ushlosha de Belshazzar, and then the 3 of Belshazzar. Hareshana mikutaos hayu. This proves that you have the years are absorbed one in the other. It's really counting partial years. The Gemara continues, Amar Rava says, Af Daniel ta b'hai chushbana. Even Daniel, he made a mistake when he did this calculation. Techsiv, because the pasuk says, B'shnas achas l'malcho ani Daniel binosi b'svarim. He says, I counted, I did a calculation, as Rashi over here says, binosi b'svarim lashon sfira v'cheshbon. I made a count and a calculation. Midukamar binosi, using this language of binosi, that he had to consider, and he had to do this count with calculations, mechlal deta, that implies that he made a mistake in his calculations. In any case, the Gemara continues, Mikol makam kashu kroya hadadi. Nevertheless, don't we have a contradiction in Psukim in terms of the calculations? Ksiv melos lebavel, because there's one pasuk that says from the time, completing the 70 years from the time of Bavel, Uchsiv lecharvos Yerushalayim, but then there's another pasuk that says it follows the destruction of Yerushalayim. Do we go by the Golus Bavel, or do we go by the destruction of Yerushalayim for the 70 years? As Rashi over here says, Ksiv lefi melos lebavel shivim shana efkod eschem Sefer Yirmiyah. Sefer Yirmiyah, it says 70 years from the time of the exile of Bavel. That's when it says it's going to be the redemption. Uchsiv b'Sefer Daniel, but it says in Sefer Daniel, limlos lechorvos Yerushalayim shivim shana. That you count the 70 years from the destruction of Yerushalayim. Mispar hashanim asher haya dvar Hashem el Yirmiyah Navi. That's what the pasuk says. That's how you count it. So the Gemara answers, Amar Rava says, Lifkida bi'alma. There was a little bit, like we said before, there was a little bit of remembrance of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There was a little bit of a redemption if you're counting from the time of the exile of the Golus Bavel. V'hainu d'chsiv, and that's what the pasuk says. Ko amar Koresh melech Pras. So says Koresh, the king of Pras. Kol mamlochos ha'aretz nosan li Hashem elokei hashamayim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave me all of the land. V'upakad ala livnos lo bayis b'Yerushalayim. And he remembered upon me, or he put upon me, to build him a house in Yerushalayim. As Rashi over here says, Lefkida bi'alma v'yamar lefi melos lebavel shivim shana efkod eschem. That's the idea that there's a remembrance, that God remembers or delivers us from the exile, from the Golus Bavel. That's what it was. Shenifkedu b'shanachas lekoresh melech Pras. They were remembered in the first year of Koresh, the king of Pras. Shishnas ayin aleph lekiva Yehoyakim. That's the 71st year from the conquest of Yehoyakim. Shepashta Bavel al Yisrael. That's when the Golus Bavel began, when Bavel began to conquer Klal Yisrael. And we should note over here that the Gemara is also centering on the word pakad over here, as we said that in Sefer Yirmiyah it says efkod eschem, and here that's the exact same language used by Koresh, so that's the idea that there's a pekido bi'alma. And the Gemara continues, Darash of Nachman bar Rav Chisda, Rav Nachman bar Rav Chisda darshaned, Mai d'chsiv, what does the pasuk mean when it says, Ko amar Hashem le'Mashicho, le'Koresh asher achazakti b'yamino? It says, so it says Hashem to Koresh, but it calls him Mashicho, the anointed one. V'chi Koresh Mashiach Chaya, was Koresh anointed? Rashi says, was he anointed with the Shemen HaMishcha? El Amar le HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mashiach. Rather, the pasuk means as follows: HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to the Mashiach, Kovel ani l'chal Koresh. I'm complaining to you about Koresh. Ani amarti hu yivne beisi v'yikbotz kol yusai. I said that he would build the Beis HaMikdash, he would gather in the exiles. V'hu Amar, but all he did was he said, Mi bachem mikol amo vayal. I'm giving permission for everyone to go up to Eretz Yisrael. He gave permission, but he didn't do anything more than that, and that's why HaKadosh Baruch Hu complains, so to speak, about Koresh's actions. The Gemara continues at the two dots, darshaning the psukim in Megillah Esther. The pasuk says, Chel paras umadai hapartamim. In this pasuk, it puts paras before madai. Uchsiv in the pasuk also says, Lamalche madai ufaras. Here it's putting madai first. So what's going on? So the Gemara says, Amar Rava says, Asnuye asnu bahadadi. They made a condition with one another. They made the following stipulation. If from you is going to be if from us is going to be the kings, from you will be the ministers. And if from you is going to be the kings, so from us is going to be the ministers. In other words, over here where it talks about kings, so Madai comes first. The kings came from Madai. And over here it talks about the parts of Mim, it talks about the ministers. So therefore, in this particular pasuk, Paras comes first. And the Gemara continues, the pasuk says in Megillah Esther, Baharoso es osher kavod malchuso, he showed off the wealth, the honor of his kingdom. Amar Rav Yossi Bar Chanina said, Melame, this comes to teach us, Shalavash bigdei kahuna, that Achashverosh, he wore the begadim of the kahuna, he wore the garments of the Kohen Gadol. Ksiv hach, it says over here, Yikar tiferes gedulaso, Ksiv hasam lechavur l'sifares. When it talks about the begadim of the Kohanim, it says lechavur l'sifares. It uses the same terminology over here. Therefore, that shows that again he wore the bigdei kahuna. And the Gemara continues, Uvimlos hayamim ha'ela. It says when these days were finished. And the Gemara now says, Rav u'Shmuel, there's a machlokus between Rav and Shmuel in this regard. Chado amar melech pikei achaya. One of them says that Achashverosh was a smart king, he was wise. Chado amar melech tipesh haya. The other one says he was a foolish king. Man domer melech pikei achaya. The one who says that he was a wise king. Shapir of it, he did it in the right order. What do you mean he did it in the right order? Dekarev rechika bereisha. First, he takes the people, he makes the party for the people who are far away, not for the people of his city. Because when it comes to the people of a city, anytime he wants, he's able to be mephias them. He's able to have them find favor and do things in their benefit. And therefore, again, it's better to make the celebration first. For those who are not in the city, he can always celebrate with those in the city at any time. The one who says he's foolish, no, he should have brought the people of his city close at first. That way, if the others would rebel against him, so the people from his city, they would stand with him. And the Gemara continues, Shoalu Talmida ves Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. The students asked Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai the following question. Why was it that the enemies of Klal Yisrael in that generation, why was Klal Yisrael, why were they chayiv destruction? What avera was done that they were chayiv destruction in the generation of the Megillah Esther? Amar Lehem, so he said to them, Imru atem, why don't you tell me? Amrulo, so they said to him, the reason why the crime they committed was they derived benefit from the meal of that Rasha, meaning when Achashverosh made the celebration, they benefited from that celebration. So then he said to them, if so, Shebeshushan Yehargu, Shebechol Kulalo Al Yergu. So only those in Shushan who benefited from the celebration, from the feast, so they should be killed, but everybody else should not be killed. So Amrulo, so then they said to him, to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, Emorata, so you tell us what you think the reason is. Amar Lahem, so he said to them, because they bowed down to the tzelem, they bowed down to the idol. Rashi says that was during the times of Nebuchadnezzar. So Amrulo, so they said to him, but if that's the case, how did they ever find favor? A miracle was performed on their behalf, and they were saved. If they ended up worshiping Avodah Zarah, why should they have been saved at all? So Amar Lahem, so he said to them, Heim lo asu ela lifnim. As Rashi says, they only did it out of fear. They didn't really want to serve the Avodah Zarah. They did it outwardly because they were forced. So Af HaKadosh Baruch Hu lo asu imo en ela lifnim. So to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he did it outwardly, made it look like they were going to be destroyed, but didn't actually destroy them. He didn't actually want to destroy them. That's what the pasuk says. Kilo ina milibo. He didn't afflict from his heart. Again, it wasn't something with the intention of following it through. It was just an outward appearance. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. Bachatzar ginas bisan hamelech. The pasuk talks about the courtyard, the garden, the palace of the king. How do you understand this pasuk? So Rav u'Shmuel to machlokas Rav and Shmuel. Chad Omar haroy lechatzer lechatzer, haroy legina legina, haroy lebisan lebisan. One of them says it depends how fitting you were, how important you were in the country. If you were someone who was fit to be in the courtyard, you got to be in the courtyard. If you were fit to go to the garden, you went to the garden. If you were fit to go to the palace, so you went to the palace. The other one says, Hoshivan b'chotzer. What happened was actually he put everybody in the courtyard. V'lo echzikasen, it wasn't large enough, it didn't hold everybody. Begina v'lo echzikasen. So then he moved them to the garden, and that also didn't hold everyone. Ad shechnisan lebisan v'echzikasen. Then he entered them, he brought them into the palace, and that was able to contain them. B'masnisatan, in the Brisa, they have another understanding. Hoshivan b'chotzer. What happened was he put everybody in the chotzer. Again, this is talking about by the feast. He put everybody in the chotzer. Upasach lem shnei psachim, and he opened up two doors. Echad legina v'echad lebisan. One of them went to the garden, and one of them went to the palace. The Gemara continues, the pasuk in the Megillah says, Chur karpas u'sechelas. What are these items? So the Gemara says, My chur, what is chur? Rav amar chori chori. Rav says it was a kind of material that had a lot of holes in it. Rashi over here says, Chori chori ma'isa machir. It was a stitched material. Melechas hamatzos haisa asuya nekavim nekavim. It had a lot of holes in this material. And Shmuel amar, and Shmuel says, Milas levana. What it was a white kind of a wool, a white kind of a fabric. Hitzia lehem, that's what he spread out for them. And karpas, and what is karpas? Amar Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina, Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina says, Karim shel pasim. What it refers to is cushions made out of velvet. And the Gemara continues, the pasuk says, Al galile kesef v'amudei sheish mitos zohav v'chesef. It says there were mitos made out of gold and they were made out of silver. So again, which one was it? Was it gold or was it silver? So Tanya the Brisa says, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda says, Haroi lekesef ket lekesef. Somebody who was fit to be seated upon a chair that was made out of silver, he would be given something that was made out of silver. Haroi lezav lezav, and somebody who was fit to be seated on something that was made out of gold, he would be seated on something that was made out of gold. Amar lo Reb Nechemia, so Reb Nechemia said to him, Im kena atamatel kina besud. If that's what you're going to do, then there's going to be all kinds of jealousy during this feast, during the meal. We'll take a look at Rashi over here. Haroi lekesef mito zav v'kesef kadarish. Sar haroi lezav lezav. If you had an officer who was fit to be with the gold, he'd have gold. V'garua lekesef, somebody who was not that fit, somebody who was of lesser stature, would get the silver. So again, Reb Nechemia says if that's the case, there's going to be anger and jealousy during the feast. Rather, the Gemara says, Ella rather says Reb Nechemia, Heim shel kesef v'raglein shel zav. The mitos, actually, they were made of silver, but the feet, the legs of them, they were made out of gold. Bahat v'sheish, then the pasuk talks about Bahat v'sheish. It's talking about precious stones. Amar Rabasi says, Avonim shemischotetos al balein. What it refers to over here is it was stones that people have to pursue them with a great amount of effort. V'cheinu Omer, and the pasuk says likewise, Avnei nezer misnosos al admaso. You have these kind of precious stones throughout the land. Rashi over here says, Mischotetos al balein ritzba asolahem. What it means is that Achashverosh made a floor ba'avonim chatutos, with these stones that are very precious. Kolomar shalobo lidei adam el betorach. Mechatutos means they're the kinds of stones very difficult to attain them. Shemechatetim umachzirim balein achrein. People have to pursue them. Ad shemotzian osan bedam yikarim. You have to spend a lot of money on them. V'cheinu omer shamikra meshabeach avonim yikaros. We find similarly the pasuk praises when you have stones that are very precious. The idea is it takes a lot of effort again to get these kinds of stones. What's the pasuk actually talking about? The pasuk is metaphorical. It's talking about Klal Yisrael in the future, that they're going to be considered very important and precious among the nations. Like when you have precious stones that are throughout the land. And the literal translation over here of misnosos al admaso refers to the fact that these stones, they glitter over the land. Again, the idea is a comparison to Klal Yisrael, who are compared to these precious stones. The Gemara continues quoting the pasuk in the Megillah, Vidar v'socharis. The pasuk says, Vidar v'socharis. What does that mean? Rav Amar Dori Dori. Rav says it means there were rows of these stones. Rashi over here says, Dori Dori, Shuro Shuro Savav. You had these rows of precious stones going around. V'socheres loshen sechor sechor. Similar by socheres, it means they were going around, they were circling. So that's the idea of Vidar v'socharis. And the Gemara continues, Shmuel Amar, and Shmuel says, no, it means Evan Tova Yesh B'chrachei Hayam. There's actually a precious stone, a beautiful, a nice stone or a good stone that's in the faraway lands. Vidara Shaman, it's actually called Dara, that's Vidar. Hoshiva be'emtza Seuda, Achashverosh put it in the middle of the feast, U'mi'iro lahem katzarayim, and it made a certain brightness like noontime. As Rashi over here says, Katzarayim v'hai v'socheres loshan saharahu. That's the language of socheres. It's like a language of the brightness of the time of noon. And the Gemara continues, Devei Rabbi Yishmael taught in the yeshiva of Rabbi Yishmael was taught, Shekara derur l'chol balei sechora. What it really means is that he made a certain freedom for all the merchants. They didn't have to pay their taxes. Rashi over here says, Shakara dror l'chol bali sechora asa nachas ruach levnei malchuso. He gave this benefit to the people of his kingdom, lahaver mehan mecha shel sochrin, that they didn't have to pay the merchant's tax. And the Gemara continues, the pasuk says, v'hashkos b'chlei zahav v'kelim mikelim shonim. It said they had these different kinds of kelim at the feast. So the Gemara says, meshunim boile. Why does it say meshunim? That would have been the proper word. What's shonim? So the Gemara says, Amar Rava says, Yotzta baskol v'yamar lahem. There was a baskol that came out, and it said to them, Rishonim kalu mipnei kelim. The first ones, meaning in the time of Belshazzar, the reason why they were destroyed was because they took kelim. They used the kelim from the Beis HaMikdash. V'atem shonim behem. You're repeating, that's the idea of shonim. You're repeating the same sin and using them as well. The pasuk continues, V'yein malchus rav. It says there was a lot of wine. Amar Rav said, Melamed shekol echad v'echad eshkeyu yayin shegadol heimenu b'shanim. The term over here of malchus rav means that every single person was given wine that was actually older than him. So that was a fine kind of wine that all the people were given. V'hashasiyah kados, then the pasuk says that the drinking was kados, according to the law. My kados, what does it mean according to the law? Amar Rav Chanan mishum Rabbi Meir. Rav Chanan says in the name of Rabbi Meir, kados shel Torah means according to the law of the Torah. Mados shel Torah achila meruba mishasiyah. Just like the law of the Torah is that the eating is more than the drinking. Avsu daso shaloso rasha. So too the feast of this Rasha Achashverosh achila meruba mishasiyah. The eating was more than the drinking. As Rashi over here says, achilas mizbeach meruba mishasiyah, meaning the mizbeach eats, so to speak, more than it drinks. Par ushlosha esronim solas la'achila. You have a par, you have 3 esronim of flour for eating. V'nesa chatzi ahin. But when it comes to the libations, it's only a half a hin. So again, the eating is more than the drinking. And the pasuk continues, Ein ones, there was nothing was forced. Amar Rebbe Lazar says, Melamed shekol echad v'echad heshkeyu miyayin medina. So this shows that everybody was given the wine that they were accustomed to in their particular location. They felt very free in drinking the wine. Lasos kirtzon ish v'ish, then it says to do according to the will of each person. Amar Rava says, Lasos kirtzon Mordechai v'Haman. What it means is that they were following the will of Mordechai and Haman. Rashi over here says Mordechai and Haman served as the butlers at this feast. How do you know that the word ish v'ish refers to Mordechai and Haman? Mordechai dechsiv ish Yehudi. By Mordechai it calls him an ish, it says ish Yehudi. And Haman also it says ish tsar v'oyev. So therefore when it says ish v'ish, it's a reference to Mordechai and Haman. And the Gemara continues, the pasuk in the Megillah says, Gam Vashti hamalka asa mishten nashim beis hamalchus. It says Vashti made a feast for the women, and she made it beis hamalchus in the palace. So beis hanashim boile. Gemara says it should have been called the Beis HaNashim. It should have been in the women's quarters of the palace. So the Gemara says, Amar Rava says, Shnein Lidvar Aveir Niskavnu. What it really means is both, talking about both Achashverosh and Vashti, they really had in mind to do the Aveira. They wanted the men and the women to be together for the purpose of Aveira. And Hainu Damri Inshi, and that's what people say, Ihu Bekori V'itase, when it comes to the man is going to be with pumpkins, and the wife is going to be with zucchinis. What the expression is going to mean is that the idea is that the husband and wife, they often have basically the same intentions. We'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Yud Beis Amud Beis.